Welcome to our marathon long run video where, look at it this way, this is going to be a video where we share all the times we've made mistakes, and there are lots, so that you don't have to. So let's enjoy the run. So your marathon long runs should be a messy joy, literally. They're kind of your training ground. And what I mean by that is that not only are you actually training, but you're training your hydration, your nutrition, you're training to get things almost wrong so that you learn what works for race day, so you have the best experience on race day. You might have some torrid training sessions, but if you do, and you do learn, you're going to have some amazing race days. So here's how we're going to approach it today. I'm going to break it into 3 simple parts. How we approach before we go out for our long run, the things that we do, breakfast, preparation. Then during the long run, the things we think about, the things we do. And then how we recover after the long run, probably that bit summed up by car chat. And hopefully that's just helpful in breaking it down and giving you an idea of what we're thinking whilst we're planning our long runs. This is a half marathon today, so it's not our longest long run, but we're building a platform to springboard off of for later in the season. Let's carry on. We're going to get to all this stuff in a minute. The first thing you need to know about before you go on a long run is that it's really crucial to not just go on a long run. Let me explain that a little bit more. What I mean by that is you need to kind of know the distance that you are going to run on that day. It's all very good sometimes going out and going, oh, do you know what? I feel good. I'll run a little bit longer. But if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a gradual build so that your body is able to keep up and adapt over time to try and get you to the distance you want to run, it can go quite quickly wrong. And I've seen it happen on a lot of occasions. So by way of quick explanation, what I mean is, let's say you're running a marathon, work backwards, plan your longest run about 2 or 3 weeks before your marathon, maybe 35 kilometers. For a start, you do not need to run a marathon before a marathon. And then you use the 10% rule. So each week you go about 10% back for 3 weeks, and then you have a recovery week, 10% and backwards that way, so that you are gradually building. The 10% rule just keeps your body safe and it allows it time to adapt. If you go from a half marathon to maybe next week a 30 kilometers, it's too much for the body in one leap. So planning and knowing the distance that you're going to go out and do is really, really important when you want to sensibly plan a long run and when you're in it for the long term. I'm sure I've got a video for that somewhere, so I'm going to try and find it, link it there. Now, other bits of clothing. We're going to talk more about the clothing and choices while we're out on the run, but just for examples, I used to take this Camelback out on a run with me, but actually I found it too clunky and the hydration in there, it was too much, and I was getting kind of friction burn. So these are great for the bike, but actually what we found is that these hydration vests, this one is Ultimate Direction, but there are plenty out there, and you can pop them on. It holds drinks flasks in the sides, you can put your phone in there, it can hold hydration, and it really doesn't, you don't notice that you're wearing it, if I'm honest. So things like this, hydration vests are really good for long runs, particularly if you're going over half marathon distance. I would recommend these, doesn't have to be this brand, but I would recommend a hydration vest. And the other thing is I wear a flip belt. Actually I wear a flip belt when I race as well, because I found that this can hold 6 or 7 gels, and that's what I need in a race. So I tend to wear this on every run that I go on, just because my body gets used to it, and I take the GoPro in here and I take the gels in here, and I just get comfortable knowing what it feels like. And this has been really good. There's a review up there for the flip belt, but again, these are just ways of transporting things that you need around with you so that you're fully prepared for the run before you go out on the run. And finally, my big thing is really have a solid breakfast a couple of hours before. Don't do it 30 minutes before, but I'm not a fan of fasted runs, especially when you're trying to go long, especially when you need carbohydrates for energy. And people say, well, yeah, but it turns yourself into a fat burning machine. You metabolize, it's called beta oxidation. But actually, you still do that. If you're running in low enough zones, your body still utilizes fat over carbohydrates, whether you fasted, run or not. And yes, it's a personal preference, and yes, there are some people that like that feeling. But I don't. I like to know that I'm fueled up properly, because even quite recently I've had some runs where I've felt really low on energy, and I know I've had a good breakfast and I've got gels with me. So I just like to know that I'm doing it right. It means I can put the quality into the training. Oh, and I definitely have a coffee before I go as well, because caffeine is a wonderful, wonderful way of just getting yourself ready for the run. And it might not be for everyone, but you probably know this if you follow the channel already. I love caffeine. I love coffee. And that's about it for the before. Plan right, plan long term, eat right, hydrate right. Then you're ready to get yourself out there. Then you're ready to actually execute on the run. That's what we're going to do now. Now you're out on the long run, it's time to think about what you're doing while you're out here. And before we touch on any of the nutrition and hydration and clothing, it's probably better to talk about your mindset while you're in it and how you actually approach the run. Because you probably see a lot of runners on YouTube, on Instagram, experienced runners, adding all sorts of dimensions to their long run, like intervals, tempo, higher pace, things like that. But in my opinion and my experience, if you're newer to running, then actually going out and just having a long run where you can talk with each other, you're in zone 2 and you get to the start line of your first race, that's way more important, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
So what I'm really saying is don't overthink it. Just go out and enjoy, because there will come a time down the road, if you stay in the running game, stay on your running journey, that you can add intensity and you can add intervals and you can do fun stuff with your long run. But actually just staying in the zone 2 in the early days, way better, because you're much more likely to get to the start line.
Yeah, I think for me it's about having no pressure on the long run to meet a time or anything like that, or pace. It's about just getting the miles in your legs and body and just being kind to yourself on that process.
Be kind to yourself, very good point. So nutrition, two things I want to talk about with nutrition, and it is that this is the time to experiment with the gels that you're going to use on race day, or the nutrition you're going to use. But not only that is how often that you use them. We don't practice that every single week because that would be quite expensive, but actually what we know is how our body responds, because we've run marathons before. So we do like these cyst gels, but lots of people use lots of different gels. So, you know, I'm not saying that these are the best ones. These are the ones that work for us, and that's the point. Find what works for you, because if it doesn't work for you, I wouldn't trust a fart past mile 22, if you know what I'm saying.
And be wary of caffeine, because I took too much in my first marathon and my heart was like beating way too fast, way too early.
So these are the points. Training is the point where you try all this out, and if it goes wrong, it goes wrong, but you learn, and it doesn't go wrong in a race. I would never rely on the gels they hand out to you during the race, because if your body doesn't know them, what do we talk? Hydration. So actually we're very lucky today, because we bought a drink with us and put it in the car, because we drove 5 minutes down the road just so we got a different start point.
Because sometimes you don't want to carry loads with you, so it's good to do a loop and factor in being able to stop for a drink. especially if it's a really long run.
Yeah, I mean, hydration. Why have I got a problem with that? Hydration is a lot like nutrition, as in you've got to experiment, find out what works for you and when. When we actually run marathons, we don't take hydration with us. We take the water from the aid stations and have our own gels. But while we're in training, I tend to have a pouch here and here for the longer runs, but we don't find we need it for half marathons, do we?
Not in like the winter months, but in the summer I take my hydration vest.
So as for nutrition, experiment with your hydration. We use electrolyte drinks, but you could use energy drinks, which are much more glucosey. You used to cramp my stomach, so I moved away from those. Some people use water. You know, whatever you use, try out what works for you, what doesn't, as with everything, really. Home stretch. So exciting. We've got about 1.5 kilometres to go. So the last thing I want to touch on is your clothing choice while you go out. And again, you probably got the message by now, but it's a chance to experiment, try different things. Definitely don't race for the first time in a race with clothes you've never tried in training. So when the weather gets a bit nicer, certainly time to get your actual race gear on. But when we train, I tend to wear layers. I take this Ultimate Direction hydration vest because I can fit my GoPro, my drone, drink, nutrition, keys, everything in there. And that's been really handy, especially when you start going longer than half marathon. That's when it really starts to come into its own. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I used to have a pair of socks that I used to love running half marathon-y distance in. But the moment I got over half marathon distance in training, I found out that they gave me a huge blister on the outside of my little toe. And I would never have known that if I hadn't have tried them in training and gone on the long run. And then I'd have gone into a race and been in agony. So you have to experiment, you have to make your mistakes. Oh, and you have to lump shoes into that equation as well. Again, I have so many different pairs of shoes. So does Mary, for different training instances. I have my long run shoes, my long fast run shoes, easy fast, and that's just all experimentation again. Which ones feel right for which occasions, which sessions. So get the right shoes for you, and also practice wearing your race shoes in training every now and then. Don't just leave it to the last day. Nothing new on race day is a very good phrase to live your life by. Just sat on my drone. That's us done. 21.11. Let's get a coffee. Let's get something to eat. Let's talk about what you do after the long run, because that is as important as the long run, trust me.
And it's a really good bit.
What one bit is?
Yeah.
Ready, Mary? Your go. Do it this time. You do it.
I can't.
Go on, please. Just say it.
Car chat.
Say it louder.
Welcome to car chat.
I can just imagine all of the things that I've done special effects wise to that. Right, well, let's talk about recovery and after the long run, because that's as equally important as actually the running. Because once you've finished, I mean, yes, we've just gone and got coffee and cake. I mean, sorry, not sorry, but there are a set list of things that we will now do for this afternoon, right? That will help aid our recovery and get us ready for our next run.
Yeah, usually the very first thing we do is to stretch.
That's really hot.
Before anything else.
Yeah, comprehensive stretch routine. Honestly, it has been a lifesaver to me on a number of occasions, and I'll link the stretch routine that I go through up here. But we also foam roll, you know, we make sure we try and iron out all the knots. Once you get on a foam roller, you kind of get a feel for
where the tight spots are.
And you know them, don't you? And you go, oh, and then you take the time and you work on those. And I think that's really, really crucial when you're starting to crank up the mileage into real long runs, because, you know, a half marathon today is just our jumping off point. We're going to need to be jumping up to, by the time we get to marathon ready, just before we taper, you know, you're at about 35 kilometres.
Yeah.
So keeping on top of it, prehab over rehab is really the thing that we kind of preach, isn't it? We have a massage gun.
Yeah.
That we get into all the little nooks and crannies of the calves and the hamstrings. My calves are my particular problem.
Yeah, and we sometimes put calf compressors on for the rest of the day.
Yeah, they're good for recovery, get our legs up. And also, you know, don't neglect, once you finish the run, it's not the time to just go, oh, I'm done, I was hydrated and I got my nutrition right. Get hydration on board. Your body's going to be using all of the fluid you've got in you to kind of recover, so you're going to need to keep ticking that over, getting water, getting electrolyte drinks in. Also, if it's near lunchtime, then eat, because you have this 30-minute golden period where your body is much more receptive to taking in the nutrients from the food that you eat straight after exercise. So
yeah, like a nice balance of protein and carbs and
100%.
Yeah,
and it's just looking after yourself. The run is important, but the preparation and the after is equally as important. You have to treat this seriously. So I hope that's helped. It was just ideas out of our head, really, how we approach a long run, mentality-wise, and everything. And just don't be afraid to experiment. The whole point is getting things wrong in training. There's a saying that I'm going to leave you with this week. The more you sweat in practice, the less you bleed in battle. And I live by that. I make sure that there is nothing left to chance on race day, as do you, right? Kind of.
I try my best.
See you next week.